So hello, everybody. My name is Mark Sage. I'm the Executive Director of the AREA, which stands for Augmented Reality Enterprise Alliance. We are the only global membership-funded not-for-profit alliance dedicated to helping accelerate the adoption of enterprise AR by supporting the growth of a comprehensive ecosystem. And I'm really excited to be here again with three great individuals, thought leaders in the enterprise AR space. Have been working for their companies, and I've been lucky enough to work with them for quite a long period of time. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves first, but just a quick bit of background about the area in that we're made up of the providers of AR technologies and non-commercial companies. But most importantly, I think, is the enterprises that are deploying the technology. This is where we're really learning about the kind of benefits, well, let's say the problems that they're solving, the benefits that they're achieving, but also some of the challenges that they have to overcome. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today, those three simple kind of questions. So I'm super excited. I'd like to introduce William Harding from Medtronic. William, would you like to introduce yourself just real quick?
This is William Harding. I'm from Medtronic. I'm a distinguished technical fellow with Medtronic for about 24 years. And I've been able to have the advantage of being able to work with a considerable number of new projects around medical devices, and where we've been able to incorporate technology such as augmented reality.
Fantastic. Thank you, William. And Jovan?
Sure. Jovan Celar. I'm an engineer and product owner within the Technology Innovation Lab at Newport News Shipbuilding. We design nuclear-powered aircraft carriers and submarines. We've been around for about 135 years, I think 135 years this year. Not me personally, obviously, but our company. Yeah, we'll leave it there.
Fantastic. You don't look a day over 20. And Dane, a quick introduction for your good self.
Yeah, so my name is Dane Laughlin. I work for Invista, which is a polymer intermediates company. So we make anything from the material that goes into sailboat sails to carpet fibers. And I've had the opportunity over the last 3 to 4 years to develop a couple different platforms and use a bunch of different tools. So I'm excited to talk with everybody today.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, guys. And let's kick on with it straight away. To me, one of the important things with any new technology, but especially around augmented reality, is it really needs to solve business problems. It's not just technology for the sake of technology. So I know you guys have got some great stories of the work that you've been involved, but let's go back to William. And William, it'd be great to talk about kind of the problems that you've been solving in your journey within AR.
Perfect. So ironically, we think of COVID as being something that has really forced us into the remote telepresencing need effectively. But long before that hit Medtronic, think about a company that's spread across the world and in our areas of trying to address patient needs, doctors' needs, or even our manufacturing's needs. We weren't able to get our people around places as we needed to quickly to address some small area within manufacturing, as example, support, training, onboarding, even sustainability. And so we started exploring things with AR, VR, and other technologies to say, how do we quickly address those needs to cut down on number of plant shutdowns or loss of product, as far as the distribution wise. So when COVID popped in, we were ready to strike. We had everything we need. And if you think about, I'll give an example of ventilators. During the early stages of COVID, when ventilators needed to be distributed, we needed to build them. We needed to put them out into the field. We had to train the people to use the ventilators. We had to support those ventilators, and we had to trace those ventilators. Every one of those elements I just mentioned were a key point of this whole COVID aspects that everyone's experiencing. And through AR, we were able to put, as example, a doctor in a headset, or a clinician or somebody in a headset to address a patient's need, or to help a supervisor or nurse or somebody in a hospital to change a battery out on a ventilator, change a hose, change the tubes. But it wasn't always just about that experience of support and sustainability. In one of our facilities in California, we saw just a growth of number of people who had to be pulled in to help build an RF ablation device. So how do we train them in assembly of these components? How do we reduce the burden on the supervisors and the other trainers through an AR solution, tablet or headset based, We were able to help guide them through digital twins, through video stills, everything distributed through these systems. So at point of view, they were able to understand how to assemble that product, how to confirm, and to collaborate with other colleagues in the event that they said, hey, I don't understand exactly what I'm looking at. I need a training assist type scenario. So beyond the point of support and sustainability, it was also very instrumental in our successes, specifically around training and onboarding new employees.
Sorry, William, there's some great insights there. Remember to unmute. Jovan, let's go over to the Newport News shipbuilding use cases.
Sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we've been around for quite some time. Our company spent the last century in a legacy engineering environment. Paper drawings and large volumes of paper documentation. Right. Really a big dependency on paper. And we're currently several years into a digital transformation. It's getting us out of that drawing environment and into a more interactive model-based engineering workflow. From a use case standpoint or business problems, it really varies. We've done a lot in kind of a broad area. We've, for one, eliminated the need in a lot of instances to build out mock training classrooms and mock environments, right? Through the use of some of the AR and VR solutions for both ourselves, our trades, and the different organizations, on the waterfront at Newport News Shipbuilding, but as well as our Navy partner customer. And then also, we've provided relevant engineering and design information for an entire aircraft carrier, for example. Every bolt, hatch, system, and workplace is essentially augmentable at our user's discretion. So really providing that information to the user, available on a device that either is in their pocket or it's available at their fingertips while they're down there doing work. We found to be a huge enabler just across the enterprise.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. And we'll come back to some of the benefits you'll be able to realize that in a second. Dane, let's come down to your good self.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to point out is that I think a lot of times when we think about AR, we kind of get stuck in, it's an ops tool or it's a, XYZ tool in different verticals. And I think across the business here, we've seen several different use cases that have been really valuable, and they kind of touch different parts of the business. So, an example of that would be, remote assist, right? So, William talked a little bit about, COVID and how that's been challenging for a lot of the businesses, that we may work for. And a good example for us would be, traditionally when we would go and do like account audits for inventory at the end of the year to true up our books, we would send, groups of people to all the different sites, and they would go and count inventory at the facilities. Well, during COVID, you can't do that, right? And so what we did is we actually used, a company called Mira, but it's a headset, and we put the headset on somebody that was on site, and they could virtually go and count inventory together. So our kind of third-party auditing group was able to get comfortable with that, and it saved us a bunch of money in both travel, but also when you're using AR, it's you can kind of jump from one conversation to the next very quickly. Whereas, if everybody is on site, you might have to take a golf cart from one location to the next, et cetera. And so we were able to, execute those, audits. We cut the time essentially by like 70% in the actual time it took us to do those audits. And we were able to audit multiple different facilities in one day, as opposed to, trying to schedule it with travel and all that different stuff. So that's a good example of where it actually affected accounting, which is not where people usually think of, applying augmented reality technologies, firsthand. We've done a bunch of work instruction work. So, if I'm a maintenance technician and I'm going to go execute a job, I need to understand, the parts that are involved, what the process is, all these different things. The challenge that we generally have in that area is that either you don't have availability for your trainer, who is the subject matter expert, or you may not have asset availability to train people on. And so augmented reality has helped us kind of separate, the real world versus the virtual world, if you will. And so you can train people asynchronously with the real world, which is really a powerful tool because it removes the existing constraints that you have and the needs around, again, time availability or asset availability. So that's been really powerful for us as well. We're working on some new stuff, which is really cool. It's kind of Google Maps-esque for your own plant internally. And so and especially right now, everybody has turnover, right? We're in kind of a unique situation, I would say globally, with the economy and people moving roles and quitting. And so our ability to take somebody who's new and turn them into kind of a productive asset, if you will, for us, is a really valuable tool. And so we've also used AR to essentially upskill people without the need of a trainer involved, which has been super valuable for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks, Dane. And kind of a couple of observations, guys. I get asked this question a lot and say, well, what kind of industry is AR, really taken off and stuff like that? And I say, actually, it's not to do with the industry. It's very much to do with the use case. And I think all three of you have mentioned use cases that are similar, across your companies, but used in different places. We taught remote assistance in accounting, remote assistance there. So I think it's one insight is to be very clear on what problem needs to be solved. I guess the other kind of question, and perhaps I can come to you first, William, obviously COVID has really happened or really helped the industry. Do you think this is going to continue, or do we need to look at new use cases now to really kind of push forward the industry? How's the kind of COVID thing going to pan out specifically on AR?
I think it is changing. It's a good question, Mark. I think it is changing the landscape. It's changing the mindset. And it's, to me, like I said, it's always existed, especially, I used to have to travel to Switzerland and Puerto Rico, and people would say, oh, you had to? No, it really, I love Switzerland, don't get me wrong, but you still had to travel, and it puts you out of place. But in doing those things, I was just one person, and a day lost here, a day lost there to try to accomplish throwing a switch on a PLC. It was a significant difference, of saying I needed a tool that was going to allow me to be effective. And so for us, when it comes to a manufacturing process of a medical device, and we need to do a validation acceptance test, we say, well, how would I do that? Well, we were able to send a headset as an example to a person in Italy with a little bit of an interpreter between us, and within minutes have this person testing out the equipment and qualifying it. Kind of like Dane had said already about, augmented, as far as auditing, we were able to do virtual audits. And what I like about what you kind of said is, in this COVID scenario, I think it's forced us to look for solutions that we should have been looking for a long time ago. I use an example. I often tell people that, manufacturing is the same as surgery, and they don't really get it initially, but we say consumables, reusables. We think of inventory, traceability, product. We think of all these kind of basic elements of the structure. When you think in surgery, you have a product, you have consumables, you have reusables, you have traceability. You have all the same elements, but you would love to have the reliability, the precision that I do in manufacturing. You love to have that in surgery. And when people start to say, well, wait a minute, I could do that. Now you start looking at it through the eyes of a clinical specialist who has to go in a room and give a doctor programming settings for a cardiac device. And you think, wait a minute, that person could have been in another room helping another doctor and doesn't have to stand there for 45 minutes just to give a 5-minute interaction. Could that person then address 10 doctors? So when we looked at the limitation of doctors' availability, we looked at cases of engineers' availability for manufacturing. We looked, like Dane had said about the new employees. We're pulling people in Mexico City right off the street trying to train them. We don't have enough supervisors. We don't have enough resources to do this. How are we going to do this? And so this type of tool, I'm not saying it's a magic bullet to all the solutions. There are barriers, there are things you have to think about. But when it comes to sharing something like, I pull up a headset and I see a video of a colleague show me how to handle safety. Or I see a document that I can check and say, yeah, that's my requirement. Or I'm a doctor and I bring up patient vitals and I bring up also patient programmer information while maintaining point of view on that patient. The power of that message, to be able to keep your hands engaged, see what I see, and be able to accomplish the goals with less burden on other individuals. And again, without loss of time during distances. That's the power of this type of tool.
Perfect. Thank you, William. I'm just going to jump over to Dane, who kind of mentioned that COVID was a big driver within his organization. Any kind of additional comments? And I guess a quick comment on where do you go to next? You know, COVID is still with us, but the world is changing. You mentioned a few things, but how's COVID impacting your next strategy steps?
Yeah, so obviously nobody wishes for COVID, right? But to William's point, it kind of forced us to look for opportunities or for tools that we should have been looking in the first place. You know, for any business, any challenge that they have really kind of boils down to time. You know, whether it's the amount of people in their time working on a project, like you can abstract it out, and it's always time as a constraint. And so I think where AR is really helpful is, like I said, in our accounting use case, we saw a 70% reduction in the amount of time, and they didn't have to travel, right? And so for any business that's looking at their bottom line and they're seeing the amount of money that they're saving in travel, over COVID, and are still able to effectively run their business, that's an indicator that there's technology now that allows us to support in ways that we couldn't before. And so, in my opinion, AR is not going away. If anything, it's going to be more pervasive than ever. Cell phones with LiDAR on your iPhone, for instance, is making the technologies necessary very accessible. And so I think you'll see an acceleration of AR, both kind of headset worn and mobile device worn, in the next year or so. And I think businesses really have kind of come to the understanding that, hey, we can actually do this without flying William to Switzerland or having Dane travel 80% of the time, right?
I thought it was interesting what you just said around one of the elements you kind of the LiDAR and things with the cell phones. I thought it was pretty cool because I imagine you and Jovan had said and probably have the same type of things of, I imagine you've got your headset on, you've got your phone, and you say, hey, I need to scan that ship. I need a part I need to show somebody, and you use LiDAR and you get that digital reference, that digital twin. And the same thing with you as you're pulling it up. It's like how to make a relatable environment that you might project somebody in, like a customer or something like this. Is I like your tie-in to the LiDAR and where you could probably use that to help fill in the gap, because this is a magic bullet. It isn't really a magic bullet. The content is the element. What do you think? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, well, so I've seen Jovan's, some of the solutions that they've come up with, and it's pretty awesome. So I want to, Jovan, I'm interested in kind of your thoughts on the LiDAR stuff.
So I know it's something that's been, looked into on our end, from our research arm, but a little bit outside of my area. So can't speak too much to the LiDAR, use case embedded within our products.
I'm kind of quite interested. Jovan, when he spoke, didn't mention the COVID word, or he might have done, but probably not in the kind of same context. I know you guys have been doing this for a long time. Did any of what we spoke about actually impact you at all, or were you on a kind of a clear path of, we have I know you have a very clear kind of strategy of where you go. How did COVID affect you, if at all?
I don't know that it necessarily impacted us much. I do agree with both Dane and William's perspectives. I think one of those big intangibles that we've seen is like that we've kind of been pushed towards technology at a rate probably much quicker than if COVID had not sort of forced it, right? Some of those intangibles, I think we've seen a more engaged maybe workforce, as it relates to technology and adoption, right? Certainly a lot more interest in technology and mobile solutions. We know we can't get together as much, and we haven't been able to as much as we did before. So it's just another opportunity that, as Dane mentioned, that, we're sort of forced to utilize that we probably should have been utilizing to its full potential, earlier on.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think brings me nicely onto the next point, which is, and I always call this bit, show me the money. As a business leader, they're not going to invest in new technology without there being some return on investment. and then what you guys have done in terms of delivering these solutions is created both tangible and I think, and I know because I've spoken to you before, some intangible. And what I mean by that is probably things that you didn't think before that was going to happen, or things that have kind of really benefited the wider organization, which was kind of almost new to you or something you didn't expect. So kind of want to focus on the money part to start with. I'm going to actually go back to Jovan, start with you, and talk a little bit about your kind of business case development, ROI and benefits bit within Newport News.
Sure. So as I mentioned, we've been, our group was formerly known as the AR team, as the majority of our portfolio, pre-2019 was really heavy around AR. And during that time, we've had a chance to explore a huge number of different use cases. And some of the more successful solutions here recently that have gone from that, prototype, pilot, and now on that road to production have been applications where that were sort of designed to be broad and generally usable by many different trades and many different organizations, right? So one of our tools called Onsite, I think I spoke on a little bit earlier in the year, our mobile compartment visualization application. So essentially, we're providing the product model for all 3,200 or so compartments on, of an aircraft carrier, and making that available on the company-issued mobile devices for any employee that may be working on that program. So whether you're in inspection or in welding, or you're a painter or an electrician, you at your fingertips have access to that relevant information of the space that you're working in, and able to pull that up in both a 3D, 3D mode, and then also an optional augmented reality experience where you can, overlay in full scale the product model in an empty compartment and understand really quickly where all the equipment's going to be installed. And you get that clear picture of what this thing should look like when it's complete. We have a lot of, foremen and construction supervisors. We build these aircraft carriers every 7 or so years. So there's a lot of the folks that are working on it right now. Some of the newer folks may not have been here 7 years ago to see what this space is supposed to look like when it's built out. So being able to pull that up and have that available on a device that's already in your pocket and with you, at your fingertips, has been huge. So with that come a lot of different use cases, right? And some of the more mature use cases, right? Inspection, being able to pull something up instead of flipping through drawings, highlighting certain things, and then going down and doing the ship check, and then walking through a compartment, looking at your drawing, right? Being forced to kind of do the mental gymnastics to turn a 2-dimensional drawing into a 3-dimensional object, and then go inspect against that. So we've seen cases where, for example, for temporary steel inspections, where we've taken 36-hour jobs and reduced that down to 90 minutes because, we're able to provide that product model and very clearly point out where, if anywhere, where that temporary steel should be, right? Making it very easy for the inspector to determine, is it there or has it already been removed? And then for our Navy customer, training has been a big one. We have training deployed across, all 6 submarine learning facilities around the country on diesel maintenance. And we're seeing, we're getting a lot of great feedback that the knowledge retention has been increasing, while they're really decreasing their learning curve in some of these courses, where otherwise they're looking at slides and tech manuals to train up on some of this content. So we've been very, very lucky to have this giant playground in our backyard, right? A huge shipyard, and we've seen a lot of very positive, results kind of across the board, across many different use cases. Really.
Yeah, thank you, Jovan. And just one thing, and I kind of implore the people listening to the call, Newport News Shipbuilding, as well as I know Medtronic and Dane will talk a little bit about it. Being able to talk about numbers, be it percentage numbers and things like that, really does help the industry. When business leaders say, "Oh, I've heard a little bit about this AR," but they can go to, be it the area or other places like EWTS and find this information, that really helps, because suddenly it becomes, a benefit, a realizable benefit that's going to help them improve their performance and become more efficient. So let me just jump over to Dane a sec, and then we'll come to William afterwards. Again, on the question of ROI, you've already mentioned things like 70% kind of savings and things like that. Can you just maybe elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, so I think maybe something that's important to point out first is in my brain, I kind of separate them out into two separate kind of opportunities in AR. I call them, inch deep and a mile wide, which is like everybody uses it, but there may not be, a ton of money kind of generated on each disparate one, but in aggregate, it saves us a lot of money. And then I kind of see the inch wide and a mile deep, which is the very niche, use case where you have the opportunity to save 70% and do these different things. And I think the important thing for when you're getting started is to look for those kind of inch wide, mile deep niche use cases, because then you can say, yep, look, 70% reduction, this is how much money we saved, and then be able to kind of justify the next step in the process. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to kind of grow into a platform. And so, for us, we saw that remote assist use case where, hey, we can save a bunch of money, but like, let's say there's somebody in our control room and there's somebody out in the field and they need help. Each one of those individual use cases may not justify, a whole platform or, buying a headset for or whatever. And so what the niche use case allows you to do is it allows you to kind of get that built infrastructure, low down, and then you can start stacking on additional, maybe lower value use cases as you go along. And it helps with, both buying the hardware and getting it kind of out to the people so that they're familiar with it. And then you also get this kind of effect of, we call it citizen developer, effect, where people put it on, they go, oh, wow, it'd be awesome if I could use it for this, right? And then you have kind of that next, stack of different use cases. And so that's the way that I like to think about a lot of these different things is, is this kind of a niche use case, or is this something that, like, if anybody pulled out their phone anywhere, and wanted to use this, they could, do so regardless of what their job is. And so, I talked a little bit about, the reduction in cost for like our accounting use case. Essentially, that reduction was, well, the 70% doesn't even include like the travel costs, right? So you right off the bat, you eliminate all travel costs associated with that. The next step is, instead of like, having a babysitter, for lack of a better word, right, on site where everybody flies in, that person, walks everybody around and makes sure that they're in the right place at the right time and they're meeting the right people. Instead of having that, you just say, connect me to the people that I'm supposed to be working with. And then you get them a headset ahead of time. And then you can say, okay, 30 minutes here, and then done, hang up the phone, call another person who may be at, a few miles down the line at a different area of the plant. And so it's kind of segmented. There's no travel time. There's, everybody's not eating lunch, which is important too. One thing I do want to say is I do believe in, going and kind of building relationships. I think that's one of the harder things that we've found to do, remotely, is kind of building and fostering really strong relationships with people. I do think we'll have the opportunity to improve that with, XR, as we kind of move forward in the future. But I do think kind of the emotional or friendship style of relationship is tough to do remotely right now. But yeah, so I mean, beyond that, like the Google Maps style, that's a very kind of inch deep, mile wide type of situation, because you can imagine somebody comes on site and they're brand new. Hey, you have an application that will take you to a motor that you need to go and work on, or it'll take you to a bathroom in the facility, and all you have to do is hold it up. It knows where you're at and it'll direct you there. And so, from that perspective, like going to the bathroom is not a super valuable activity, but if you save somebody 15 minutes navigating, to a bathroom versus, so they can get back on the job, then it's a pretty effective tool for, savings across a lot of different people using it.
Yeah, that's amazing, Dana. Just a couple of kind of insights, and I'd love the mile wide or inch deep kind of thing. I think that's really interesting. The one thing we've been talking a lot in the area is about kind of cost of ownership. Some of the devices and some of the solutions, I look a bit more expensive at the moment, but being able to use them over multiple use cases, I think is going to become more and more important. So I think having that in mind in your kind of thoughts about how you build on stuff is really important. William, let me come over to you to talk about the benefits side as well. I know you've done a huge amount of work and really insightful in this space.
Perfect. And I like this area because it's a multifaceted aspect of AR. And when I say multifaceted, is we can easily come back and say, using this is what we realized in throughput, in return on investment and whatnot down the line. But I like to start that type of conversation out with demystifying and making it relatable. Is we as industry leads in this technology, we know what we're talking about. We know what we've got. We think, we feel, we have it inside of us, what the benefits of this are going to be. But how do we convey that to people who haven't used it? And I think that's one of the key elements. It's like a Kickstarter or Indiegogo. You have this great idea, but how are you going to execute on it? How are you going to tell that story? So one of the things I like to emphasize with anybody trying to implement an AR type solution is the relatability of that. And so I use a quote from an Einstein quote. It says, if you can't explain it simply, you probably don't understand it well enough. So making that relatable, making and demystifying the solution so others can relate and say, oh, now I see the benefits, not trying to blow them away with jargon and whatever, but to help them understand how this is going to help them, basically. But I'll use two examples where we've gotten some really good benefits. Doesn't seem like a lot of value, but when you spread it across a lot of facilities, it's really added up. One is, everyone's heard about Six Sigma Cardboard City. And you think about how you mock up a design for a manufacturing line or a hospital or surgical arena, or like Jovan might do with a ship build, as an example. You might mock these things up and get people ergonomically kind of familiar with how the flow, how things go. We found in these Six Sigma Cardboard Cities, it was costing us a considerable amount of money to build them, to sustain them, to pull everybody off the floor, to participate in these mock-ups, and whatnot. But by the time we implemented the same thing in like a HoloLens example, or even an iPad with AR, we were able to keep the person, like for instance, multiple operators, supervisors, quality, engineering, the whole deal, keep them on the floor, in their position, working, bring the solution to them, not dedicate some huge, vast area where, cardboard has been set up and gathered here in Arizona, scorpions and roaches. But as we really try to bring it back to where they were, we found we saved $30,000 per event by simply engaging them in their space and letting them get back to work. The same can be said for surgical. It costs roughly about $40,000 if you've had to go into surgery recently for the renting of that room. The more you could give the doctors the ability to set up their equipment, to get their team prepared for the flow. You say, here's a C-arm, here's anesthesia, here's this. Those little elements, though it seems kind of something that we don't even think twice about, that's where most of the money is lost, is in that organization, in that flow. And when you're thinking about arranging and making the flow more efficient, think about how quick you get that patient out of there. They're not anesthetized too long. They're not basically at risk for infection too long. So using tools that reduce the amount of time they were in the room, besides the savings on the cost of the room, but think of what you're doing for potential readmittance of patients to hospital. This is where we saw considerable amount of money saved, time saved, intervention saved, and literally to the patient, to the caregiver, to the clinical specialist, even if you think it from the payer perspective, the insurance providers, everyone benefits from this.
I was going to say one thing that I really like that William just said there is, you rarely actually get a lot of value from just implementing like technology. It's about the process, right? So map the process out, start to finish, and then figure out where the technology inserts itself. And that's where you start to get huge benefit, because, that kind of waterfall cascade across the entire process is what ends up accumulating into a lot of money. Sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, great observation.
Absolutely, Dane. Couldn't agree more. Great observation. And thank you, William. Thank you, all three of you. So I've been sitting here, fantastic again. What problems are being solved? Again, across multiple industries, multiple different problems. I think your answers to some of the benefits have been amazing, not only with kind of percentages, but actual figures across, again, multiple use cases, stuff like that. But as a business leader, so I can understand problems, I can understand some of the benefits, but I know there's going to be some challenges. Okay, so for the next sort of 9.5 minutes, I'd love to talk about not love to talk about it because I don't want to talk about challenges, but you guys I know have gone through quite a bit there. So I'm actually, if it's okay, I'll start with you again, Dane. I know you just kind of finished off, but can you talk about some of the challenges that you've had to overcome within the company and how you actually achieved those?
Yeah, so I think, initially the first thing is, this is a pretty nascent space right now. And so making sure everybody's in compliance with security protocols and all these different things, that's a fun place to start. And nobody, loves to sit around and talk about cybersecurity all day, but that's a very important place to start. I think the other challenge is, when we talked a little bit about it, the expense of kind of hardware, if you're doing dedicated, AR, for instance, so HoloLens, if it's $5,000 for the industrial version, that times, 100 people or 1,000 people gets to be, pretty expensive, at least if you're kind of piloting it out and don't have, a verified use case ahead of time. And so I think, it's important, there to start with small pilots and then kind of expand the use cases. You're validating, validating the use case, over time. And then I think, the other thing to call out is, it doesn't require a headset to get started in AR. If there's an application that is interesting, the phone in your pocket is generally good enough for a lot of the different use cases. And so I think communicating that to people, helping them understand kind of how to interact with things in AR, because it is, it's a different experience. We're visual animals, but we haven't interacted with the digital world in this way, before. And so having that conversation, I think, is really important.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Dane. There's a wide range of interesting kind of challenges. William, if I can come over to you, good self.
Perfect. I think one of the big things, the barriers that people really need to be cognitive is these are very cool headsets that we have. We have all this nice technology that we can digitally, display augmented reality environments, other things. It's nice. I call it magic, but it's really just an empty shell without the content. And that's the big barrier people have an issue with in overcoming. When you're planning a project out and you say, I need to do something in a surgical environment, I need to do something in a manufacturing environment, you're thinking, I'm going to show some videos, I'm going to show some stills, I'm going to show some digital twins of what I'm building, and I'm going to rotate it and look at it and zoom and pull it apart. I'm going to have arrows and annotation that tell me what I'm doing. That content, you really have to plan it out. You can't just assume that magic happens here, because that's where I think I see a lot of people having failures to succeed is the timeline needed to collect that CAD diagrams, to use LiDAR, like Dana said earlier about, whether it's your phone or whatever, to capture content, whether you've got your designers building something, whether you've got your videographers building things. You really got to get those stakeholders engaged early, because you have to be able to tell that story, similar to what my team has said here, is that what am I trying to accomplish? What am I going to need to get there? So do not underestimate that. And when we're talking to people that often see vendors and say, yeah, we can solve your problem, they don't have a clue about your problem. They don't have a clue about what your industry is. So really be cautious when you think about, I'm going to deploy this in 2 months and you have no content. What is it going to take to get there? So make sure you get those resources, those stakeholders involved early. I think every device we've got can use the technology. It's just, you got to really lay that out clearly.
That's amazing. Amazing. Thank you, William. I might come back to all three, but I want to go over to Jovan because, and again, we'll listen to Jovan, but one of my favorite ever challenge stories come from Newport News Shipbuilding. He may cover it, he may not, but not that I want to put you on point, Jovan, but talk us a little bit about some of the challenges you've overcome.
So one big one for us, obviously, is security, right? Especially around this latest wave of head-mounted devices. Obviously, the data that we rely on in our industry is very sensitive in nature, right? And providing that data outside of those known secure environments, creates risks for spills. So we have to be very vigilant in what hardware is sort of ready for that, right? We maintain a constant backlog of features and potential projects or backlog items that that are possible today and we know would be valuable, but not yet securable. So that's definitely one of them. Safety is another one with head-mounted devices. Going back to the original HoloLens 1 days, there's a lot of job shadowing in these industrial shop environments that we had to do, right? Can you still wear your safety glasses, the rest of your PPE? How does that work with hearing protection? And we had to really work closely with our health and safety folks, get waivers where needed to slowly introduce some of these things. And, in a lot of cases, the hardware maturity sort of took care of that, with follow-on products and, new generations of hardware. The other big challenge for us is obviously, with head-mounted devices, there's always that concern with heavy model files, right? A lot of our content and our data is very heavy. So there's a lot of optimization that has to occur in the background before some of these devices can ingest some of this content. So that's always a challenge for us, right? Kind of finding that limit and trying to fit what you're intending to expose to the end user, kind of under that limit of, be it polys or whatever. And then the other one is the kind of sort of the configuration management, right? We have millions of parts on an aircraft carrier, right? Probably tens and hundreds of millions of parts. A lot of this content gets updated every so often, periodically, right? So making sure that whatever that end user sees is sort of the latest and greatest, and that all updates that have been incorporated have been pushed through and made available as the source of information that's kind of being seen and used across the board. So really a number of challenges. I don't know if I covered the one that you were touching on, Mark.
Well, you've covered some great ones, and it kind of reflects, and I know Newport News Shipping has been a member since the area kind of started, but we've actually created committees around security and safety and human factors. So a lot of those kind of influences come in, and that's an opportunity for kind of companies all around the world to work together. The one I'd like from Newport News Shipbuilding was what I call kind of change management, or being able to work with the people who are going to actually use the tools themselves, the AI tools. And I think both William and Dane mentioned it a little bit, but on that kind of work yard, you've probably had the story I was told anyway, 40-year-old veterans, and you wanted them to use this new tool, and what I was told is that you found the kind of gnarliest, the most technophobe kind of person to work with, but actually work with them to find out what their challenges were. How could AI actually help them? And again, the story goes that this person became the biggest advocate of AI and actually was going to tell all of his colleagues and friends and say, hey, this stuff's kind of great. So it goes back to that, if we've got a real problem, you involve the workers, both from the actual end users, but the safety, the security people, the human factors, the whole part of the team from the very start. You kind of plan for a prototype, but you plan for a full implementation, but deliver a prototype, and you work towards that full implementation. And all three of you have done amazing jobs in kind of doing that. You end up with a solution that is solving real business problems. It's creating real benefit for your organizations, and I think quickly and effectively overcome some of the challenges that you've spoken about. So, guys, I kind of really wanted to leave it there on a kind of high note. The first thing, or the last thing I want to do is congratulate you all, and thank you for continuing to kind of talk about your work, for being evangelists, thought leaders, kind of really dedicated. It makes my job within the area and the rest of the ecosystem so much easier when I can get to speak to you people. And I guess thank you, and thanks everyone for listening. If you have any kind of questions, we have a questions opportunity now.